What business would try to set a set of complex and ambitious goals that they've never made before without an implementation plan? We've all developed our revenue models on the assumption that there will be generous grants and funding will come through official development assistance. And I think that is a risky assumption these days. We've seen ODA go down by almost a quarter between 2024 and 2025. Water is subsidized all over the world. It won't be an exception if it needs a subsidy in rural areas. In my county of Los Angeles in California, we are 10 million people. If we did not import water from 200 miles away, the county could support 400,000 people. That is a massive subsidy. We don't want to rebuild a slow development infrastructure on old images. Africa is going to be the primary deliverer of its own well-being and its own prosperity.
Welcome to Sustainably Speaking Africa, a podcast about reshaping narratives around sustainability and climate action in Africa. This podcast is brought to you by the Kenya Climate Innovation Centre and is made at Semabox. Join us for this and other episodes as we talk to industry leaders, frontline communities, and the innovators who are accelerating the progress towards a greener, sustainable future.
Thank you so much for having this conversation with us.
Great to be here with you.
I remember last year at the inaugural Africa Exchange, I was sitting with you in a room when we were having one of the catalytic exchanges, and we were talking trust-based philanthropy. We were talking about what needs to change in terms of the dynamics of the relationship. And I remember one of the things you mentioned was that a lot more should have been done in terms of amplifying the successes that probably came out of what we are now referring to as the old development models or assumptions. And this conversation that we're having right now is trying to plug into that, to amplify some of these narratives of change that we're having in the continent. And so as we begin this conversation, I think I want to start with all the things that are happening right now. What, from your perspective, do you think Africa specifically needs to build now, as some of these old development pathways weaken and new possibilities emerge? Yeah.
Sure. Well, I think it's actually, in all its complexity, a promising moment for Africa.
Yeah.
When you think about it, the global development as we know it started around the time of independence as an accompaniment to that. But it was designed without a whole lot of African input, a whole lot of African guidance. And I think there is a ton more human resource talent, experience, resources in general on the continent now than at the beginning of this endeavor.
Yeah.
And for us at Hilton, that's one of the reasons we've been so enthusiastic about locally led development.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of talent that needs to be brought into the mix. And that's at all local levels, if you like. That's national governments, that's subnational governments, that's civil society, that's the private sector. Yeah. And so I think all of that can be built into if you like, a development 2.0. I think what was said earlier today at Africa Exchange, particularly by Moki, about the narrative needs to be right, the narrative needs to be energizing and credible, I think is really important. We don't want to rebuild a slow development infrastructure on old images. This is in some ways going to be Africa's century in terms of African population, in terms of the youth concentration here who will be the leaders of the planet in 30 years. So I think we need to work both on supporting local actors and aiming as much funding toward them as possible, and then also work on that narrative.
All right. You talk about locally led development and the strong conviction and support Conrad and Hilton has for this. What does that look like from your perspective? What does that locally led development look like in the context of Africa, and where do philanthropies from across the globe come in to plug into that work and sort of co-create together?
Let me tell you a little bit about our journey there.
Yeah.
Conrad Hilton, when he passed away, in his will, he said, since the money that funds this foundation has come from guests at hotels all over the world, you should spend it all over the world. And we've always interpreted that to mean that we should do about half of our grant making internationally and half domestically in the US where we're based. The international half has been overwhelmingly about Africa. But for our first 20 years of that international grant making, we did it through blue chip American nonprofits, the Save the Children's, the CARES, the World Visions, the Catholic Relief Services, which are all wonderful organizations. I'm an 11-year veteran from Save the Children, spent 8 years in Mali with them, think very, very highly of them. But they're only a slice of where the talent is, and they're not, if you like, authentically rooted on the continent, right? And they are, as we've seen, also very dependent on others funding in a way that I think we're all trying to deal with in the current situation.
Yeah.
So when I came to Hilton, I said, I think we can do a lot better than this. There are so many capable organizations that we could fund. That we made a commitment to move up from the 12 to 15% to local organizations that we're doing to at least 25% in line with the Grand Bargain guidelines, and even beyond that. And currently we're between 35 and 40% of our international grant making is to local organizations, and in some areas much higher.
25 and 30%. Between 25?
Between 35 and 45%. Yeah.
Okay.
In our refugee funding, it's at the 60% mark, and we have been at different points the world's largest funder of refugee-led organizations, which is not good. In an industry that is tens of billions of dollars, there should be larger funders than us.
Yeah.
But we're happy to get that ball rolling. We feel that there are many capable organizations. Our way in has been local nonprofits, but this is also true of national governments and critically municipalities.
Yeah.
The city of Kampala, the city of Addis, the city of Medellin in Colombia are all grantees of ours, and that's part of local for us as well.
I mean, you paint the picture that it is possible, and there are pathways that can actually work even as things continue to change and all these relationships and dynamics continue to shift. In terms of international cooperation, what are some of these models that you think still work, that we still need to adopt as we move forward, rather than just saying, like we mentioned in the earlier session today, out with the old and in with the new.
That's right.
How do we merge these two worlds, the development 2.0, as you mentioned, as we move this forward?
That's right. And I think there are some great advantages that Africa has, I would say, in comparison certainly with the United States and probably with a lot of other places, that we don't want to lose.
Yeah.
And one of the ones that has always been with me since my time in Mali in the 1990s is the strength of community solidarity. The willingness of people to help one another out mutually is amazing. If the United States had the same levels of orphaning due to AIDS that Africa had done, we would not have had a way to deal with that. And Africa just turned around and said, all right, extended family, you're first. Where extended family can't, community, you're next. And there was a safety net that was very, very strong. Now, we don't want to lose that in the rush toward working with the development finance institutions.
Yeah.
I think it's a strong, renewable, and abundant resource.
Yeah.
And I think when we talk about philanthropy in Africa, I think the most vibrant philanthropy is person to person and not wealthy person to beneficiary. Right? That said, the big challenge these days, I believe, for any civil society organization, and it's true in America as well, is revenue model. We've all developed our revenue models on the assumption that there will be generous grants and funding will come through official development assistance. And I think that is a risky assumption these days. We've seen ODA go down by almost a quarter between 2024 and 2025. We've seen the dismantling of the largest purveyor of ODA in USAID.
Yeah.
So even if the U.S. tries to recover its funding levels, it won't have a mechanism to make those grants reliably, right? And at the same time, the conundrum is that funding in the multilateral development banks is actually fairly robust, and that becomes the dynamic flow of capital and the game in town.
Yeah.
It's not clear how civil society should interact with the DFIs, which are set up, particularly in the case of the World Bank, with states as their clients,
Yeah.
right? And not even subnational levels of government, only national. And so the handshake between civil society and lent money is not yet clear. And I think, as we talked about this morning, figuring out rules of engagement, figuring out how actors should work with one another is an important part of what we should be doing right now.
In regard to that, you mentioned, I think today and even in the last year's Africa Exchange about trust-based
Yes.
Philanthropy, because often for implementing organizations or countries or partners versus philanthropy organization, that dynamic is almost always, strong with mistrust. Sometimes request for accountability sounds like an accusation, and sometimes, and it doesn't need to be that way. Sometimes the understanding of what success should look like on both sides is different, and at the end of the day, a good initiative fails in the process. What are your sentiments and your reflections on what trust-based philanthropy should look like going forward, even as we explore these new development and partnership, pathways?
I think trust is essential, and not just between foundations and civil society organizations, but actually all the actors involved, governments, the development banks, et cetera. We all need to understand one another's motivations. We need to understand what is the convergence of interest, and we need to understand what we each bring to the table that is important. If we zero in, though, on foundations and their grantees, because that was the focus of the session you were talking about last year, I think, foundations would not exist without civil society organizations to fund. We would have no way of being in the world. We would sit on a pile of money and do nothing, right? So I think that right there means that this is a partnership, and it's a partnership. It may not feel like it, but it's a partnership of equals. Now, I've spent half of my career fundraising and half as the head of an endowed foundation. And when I was fundraising, I never considered myself beholden to a funder. I never considered myself less than. There were moments where I definitely needed a proposal to be approved, right? And those are difficult. But it never occurred to me that I was a lesser part of the partnership. And in fact, a lot of the time I was trying to convince the funder that my ideas were their ideas. And that's what I expect out of the organizations that we grant to. And I think we should come across that way. We should come across as equals. We should come across as funders. We should come across in humility, because we have no success without the grantees succeeding, right? I would say, though, that I am not just a vanilla flavored trust-based do whatever you like with the funds, right?
Yeah.
Because we both, the grantee and the funder, have missions. We have things that we are here to help see done, right? And our mission is about the people who are served ultimately,
Yeah.
more than it is about the grantee, who is a partner with us in serving those people. And my working assumption is that there is a robust group of grantees out there whose aims are the same as ours,
Yeah.
right? And we'll set up a robust relationship that will have a reasonable degree of trust. If you're not happy with the way I'm talking, you can say it to me, and I as a funder should make that clear that those are the ground rules, and that I come into this with a lot of respect for what you know. The typical grantee that we fund knows their situation 100 times better than we ever will. They have a reputation, they have trust with communities, they have trust with government, they have a skill set, right? And all of those things make them actual partners and not simply public service contractors for
Or
us.
beneficiaries.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So what you allude to points to the fact that there's a need for a lot of mindset shift in terms of how different organizations, whether it's civil society organizations or implementing
That's correct.
or philanthropists themselves, perceive themselves and how they walk into these rooms. What is that single shift you hope to see in how these relationships go forward?
On the philanthropy side,
Yeah.
I meet with every new staffer at the foundation, and I say to them, there are some vices that I want you to avoid, right? The first is arrogance. People are going to come to you and treat you as though you are very important because they're interested in the funding relationship.
Yeah.
You need to preserve your humility, right? The second is complacency. Everyone else has some system they need to work in order to keep going. The governments need votes. Business needs to sell things.
Yeah.
Nonprofits need to raise money. A foundation, if it manages its endowment well, needs none of those things. It has no natural predators,
Yeah.
and that can lead to someone who just makes the same sorts of grants over and over again without really stretching and pushing themselves. So on the foundation side, I think you do need to have the right combination of humility on the one hand
Yeah.
and ambition on the other, and know how to combine those two things.
Yeah.
On the grantee side, it really is, let your vision show.
Yeah.
Let your ambitions show. Don't second guess, third guess, and fourth guess the donor, right? What we're most interested in is how you can make people's lives better.
Yeah.
And so make that the basis of our relationship. And, we don't need to be rigid about grant conditions. If things change for you, if you see an opportunity you didn't know about when we started, let's be flexible. And I think the trust is really important. But I would encourage civil society leaders to just be themselves and share their ambitions with donors.
What you mentioned about being flexible is something I think most organizations are not willing to do. Even in the face of evidence that whatever you had intended to do is not working, that flexibility to pivot and do something else and not fall victim to sunk cost.
Indeed.
Yeah.
This is reductionist, right?
Yeah.
But for me, a strategy is going from your baseline to where you want to get. And the strategy is the line that connects point A to point B, right?
Yeah.
You're never going to know exactly what path that follows, right? So your strategy is going to have to adjust as you move along.
Yeah.
And I would ask that organizations we grant to take the goal seriously. And if the way they were approaching it isn't working, then try to find another, right? And don't worry about failure. You very rarely completely fail. You very rarely completely succeed. Your job is to figure out what has worked, do more of that. What has not worked, find a different way to do it.
Yeah.
And we support people in doing that.
All right. I want us to slightly,
Yep.
in that spirit, pivot this conversation a bit on matters climate change, and this is one of the very present and very real challenges, a challenge that we are seeing now. And I know some of your programs target resilience building, whether it's communities, whether it's water access, whether it's whatever it may be. And my question is, what climate change means and what the green transition mean in the developing world is not necessarily what it means in the global north. From a philanthropy perspective, how are you bridging that in terms of supporting resilience building in the developing world, in the communities that, whether it is water they need, whether it is energy transition, or what perspectives do you have in that regard?
You know, on this question, our involvement in climate issues is peripheral.
Yeah.
So you can decide whether it's deep enough to know to merit treatment. I think clearly it will have an impact on water.
Yeah.
And we have a strong commitment to getting water to a lot of people living in rural areas.
Yeah.
Right now, they are the most neglected, and most left to fend on their own. You know, it's their rural water systems are not highly profitable, so the development banks it's a third priority or a fourth priority for them.
Yeah.
So currently, what we're trying to do is help rural water service operators, the system operators, develop a business model that more or less breaks even or comes close to it. The margin is very thin, and that margin can be greatly upset by changes in climate and by changes in water conditions. So I think it's something that we will increasingly have to factor into what we're doing. And what's a going concern today may be under stress tomorrow. We're also quite concerned, I think, about the way climate impacts the most vulnerable. And so I think over time we will be involved in adaptation efforts. But we are not in the way that SIF or Hewlett is a climate, or Packard, a climate-focused funder.
Yeah. You mentioned something about water that I want us to just briefly focus on and hear your perspectives and lived experience. You talked about the small margins around commercializing, whether it's enterprises or initiatives around water. I have seen that reflected in Kenya as well, that it's a challenge to, commercialize and scale that a bit. I don't know what your lived experience in that regard is. You've mentioned the small margins. How are you trying to navigate that with the local context and knowledge you're getting from the communities?
It's quite interesting, right? 10, 20 years ago, the water sector, people were trying to use community-based approaches, which are, the human resource part of it is abundant. The interest is there. But there are limitations in terms of a reliable system and one where water quality will be maintained at a high level. So we have, in the last 10 years, I think, moved more toward a professionalized system. And this is where the pressure and the tight margins come, because you want a system that can keep the water running 24/7, that will have 99% plus uptime, that will be reliable. If a pump breaks down, that it will be fixed within a day or two, and that people know that and can rely on that. And so the rural water system operator needs to have high standards of work in an area where people can't pay that much. Now, water is subsidized all over the world, so it won't be an exception if it needs a subsidy in rural areas. In my county of Los Angeles in California, We are 10 million people. If we did not import water from 200 miles away, the county could support 400,000 people. That is a massive subsidy.
Yeah.
And we see it all over the urban environment. So I suspect that in the best case, we'll be able to help people break even. In a more likely case, they will come short of that, and we and the government and the development finance institutions need to think about subsidizing the gap. In my previous existence with Save the Children in Mali, we had an extensive community managed schools program.
Yeah.
And we tried to get away from individual households paying school fees because we knew that the poorest households would drop out or the ones who were the least interested in their kids being schooled. So we tried to come up with community-based approaches to paying for the costs of schooling. And in southern Mali, it was simple. Plant an extra hectare of cotton, and you've got enough for a teacher's salary. Hopefully, there will be some sort of mechanism like that that can help those who don't have any ability to pay for water still get safe drinking water.
And still end up having that initiative sustainable, beyond the intervention of the partners and the donors.
That's correct. And I think that points to an important civil society part in all of this.
Yeah.
Right, is organizing communities to support the effort.
All right. I mean, looking at all the conversations we are having today at the Africa Exchange, and there's been a lot about the potential, what needs to change, what we need to rewire and refocus from a governance and leadership lens. What do you think is the opportunity here? A lot is happening in geopolitics that's really shifting a lot. There's more of transactional relationships, even in terms of bilateral partnerships and all that. What must not be lost from a governance and leadership perspective on both sides, really, as we move forward?
We talked earlier about the development narrative that the world has been subscribing to over the last 60 years. And I think there's been a very positive core to that, that the whole world should improve in the material well-being of its citizens, right? No matter where you are, your life should get better. You should have more educational opportunity. Your health should be better. And I think it's very important that we preserve that. And that the transactionalism right now, I think, is it's a minority viewpoint. Right. There will always be people who think primarily in that lens. I don't think that's the way the majority of populations, either in the North or the South, think. But I do think that it's important to reemphasize that we owe one another solidarity, and that the well-being of everyone is important. And ultimately, we survive as a planet in that way. So I believe that ultimately the solidarity frame and narrative should be much more important than any transactional one. And I think it's the more lasting narrative. We simply need to get ahead of that again. I think we have in the United States and elsewhere in Europe, we need to talk to our own citizens and say, what is your understanding of this, and have a very solid political, social, even moral basis for the work in development. I think there's all sorts of possibility for different actors to figure out how they can work best together. I'm quite excited about figuring out how to work well with the development banks. Right? If you take the water sector that we're in, I think we can, Hilton and government officials in the countries that we're in, can work out a decent business model for rural water system operators. But it takes a whole weight off our shoulders if we don't have to be on top of regulation, of enabling environment, of capital flows from the capital city. And I think that's the partnership between the development banks and the foundations. We can work out the last mile pieces along with civil society actors and local operators. If they can look after the capital city, sorts of things. And I think it will be a very good partnership.
Which points to sort of a systems approach where
Indeed.
you're not just trying to plug into one section and then after you leave.
Not at all. You may have heard me say this morning that I'm very proud that Hilton, with its own resources, can probably help deliver safe water to 5 million people. That's awesome, and it really excites us that we can do that. But when you think about it, there are billions of people who need this. So our piece is small in that whole. But if we align ourselves with Water Forward and the effort to get 1 billion people safe water, I think we can make important contributions to that, and it can make us part of a larger effort. And I think that will be very exciting to us.
Which then also means that governments get to do their job as well, so
Indeed.
that the development sector or philanthropy doesn't replace what social amenities and all that should actually be done.
That's correct. I mean, we went through a couple of decades, I should say, where the most things, in the 90s and 2000s, we did a lot of wells. We did a lot of boreholes, and it was good. But you can be sure that they broke down within 3 or 4 years, and there was no provision to fix them. So now we're working much more closely with government and with the operators to make sure that not only are we funding infrastructure, but we're also funding provisions for operations and maintenance. And that those wells, those boreholes, they should have a 20-year life, right? And that, I think, makes it much more palatable for a government to borrow money to build water infrastructure when you know that it will last that long and provide benefit for all that time.
All right. We are almost coming to an end to this conversation, but we are 3 years to 2030, and we've had the SDGs for a while now, just 3 years to the mark.
Yeah.
What does the future look like for you in terms of sustainable development as a whole, not just in the developing world but across the world? What are the prospects? Do you think we've done more misses than hits? What are you looking at in that perspective?
My career has been really intertwined with global goals.
Yeah.
Right. As I started my career in Mali, it was about education for all. And then in the 2000s, Millennium Development Goals, and then the SDGs.
Yeah.
And if you had asked me this question a year and a half ago, I would have said, it's 2027. It's about time for us to start thinking about the next 15 years, right? Just the next show. And what's the acronym going to be and what will we commit to? That script has been interrupted, right? And I think in ways that I'm ambivalent about. On the one hand, I think the SDGs were a participatory triumph and an implementation mediocrity, right? 2 billion people were consulted about the SDGs.
Yeah.
I think you can say, yes, they represent the aspirations of the species, right? But there was no financing plan. There was no implementation plan when the gavel went down and said, we approve these goals. True that it's decentralized among almost 200 governments, right? But what business would try to set a set of complex and ambitious goals that they've never made before without an implementation plan? And I think that's part of the reason that we have lukewarm support in the global north, is that we haven't shown exactly how things are going to be done, how we'll make it from A to B, how we will accomplish those goals. And I think throughout the life of the SDGs, people were predicting that we wouldn't even do 40% of what we had committed to. So I think that should change in whatever replaces the SDGs. We should be serious about what we commit to and know how we think it will be delivered. What's unfortunate, I think, is that the SDGs represented, if you like, the will of the people. Where do we want well-being to go?
Yeah.
And I think in that sense, they're still a very good vision for what should quality life be. They need to be retooled for climate. They need to be retooled for a somewhat different mindset, if you like.
Yeah.
And if ODA remains at a lower level, that needs to be built into the implementation and financing plan.
Yeah.
But I'm confident that people will still take the impulses that were in the SDGs and pursue them. And I'm really looking forward to what happens in Africa over the next decades, because I think there's just a ton of potential and a ton of energy. And today's youth is going to be tomorrow's leaders. And
today's leaders.
Yes, indeed. Indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've never thought of the SDGs in that respect. I don't know whether I'm more pessimistic or optimistic
after your bubble.
After your sentiments. Do you think we should replace or have an implementation roadmap for them and maintain them and get it financed?
It's a tough question, right? Because even if there were general global support for the SDGs, more than I think there actually is, you'd have to explain, well, how is it that we only got to this far, right? Were they so aspirational that we didn't have a pathway to them?
Yeah.
Or do you say COVID threw us all for a loop and got us off track? But I think you demonstrate seriousness by setting goals that you know pretty much how you're going to deliver on.
Yeah.
You may not know all of it, but you know in your gut that you're capable of doing it. And I think we permitted ourselves a lot of aspiration without enough thinking through how do we finance and deliver.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you don't get to what you don't set yourself as a goal.
As a goal, yeah.
And I remember very vividly when I started my career how motivating the goal of education for all was to myself, to my entire organization, and what terrific things we did because we were motivated.
Yeah.
We helped 800 communities establish schools, increase the number of primary schools in the country by 40%.
Yeah.
That would not have happened if there were not a goal to get every child into school.
Yeah.
So the goals themselves, they do motivate, but they need to be taken seriously, and people need to seriously engage.
Clear roadmaps, clear financing, and proper structures to get them through.
Absolutely.
All right. I mean, as we wrap this up, and as this conversation continues about this shifting mindsets, shifting dynamics and perspectives and development sector, what must not be lost in the entire conversation, in the entire conundrum as things shift drastically? What must not be lost by all the actors involved in this that you hope people can have as the true north going forward?
I said this morning that I am really happy to be here, and this conference means a lot to me.
Yeah.
And I think that's because it is an African-initiated, African-driven conference about what should development look like.
Yeah.
It's not a conversation in Paris or Brussels or Washington that invites a couple of Africans or forgets to. It's really what would we like to see? What is the Africa that we want to give to our children and our grandchildren?
Yeah.
And I think what must not be lost, one thing is courage. And what Moki was talking about this morning, your idea of yourself, what you're capable of doing, what you commit to, and what you hold yourself accountable for. I think that Africa is going to be the primary deliverer of its own well-being and its own prosperity. Mm-hmm. The rest of us can help and are, I think, very motivated to do that. Mm-hmm. But what I see here is a real spirit to figure out what do we want to be next, and how do we get there, and how do we take our rightful place, if you like, in the overall system.
Mm-hmm. Courage. Thank you very much.